Written thousands of years ago, the book of Job in the Old Testament of the Bible describes two huge monsters that God said He Himself had created. Could these great beasts, the Behemoth and Leviathan, actually have been alive when the book of Job was being written? According to scientists, dinosaurs ruled the planet for millions of years. But today, most scientists would agree that all of these magnificent creatures died off or were killed 65 million years ago. But how could that be if the book of Job is describing actual living creatures? Is it possible that some species escaped whatever it was that killed the dinosaurs and survived to the time of Job? Or could it be the scientists are simply wrong about the age of the dinosaurs? The scientific consensus seems to be that it was the impact of a giant asteroid that brought about a global catastrophe that wiped out virtually all living things. Or perhaps a giant volcanic eruption that filled the sky with smoke and ash and sent the seas beyond their bounds, plunged the Earth into nuclear winter. Or could there be another answer? Is it possible that the fossil record points to a different kind of natural disaster? One that just might change everything we think we know about our world and leave some dinosaurs alive, even today. We'll search for the real answer in this episode of Ancient Secrets of the Bible. We are about to look through the pages of the first continuous recorded history of mankind in the book we call the Holy Bible, as we continue our investigation into some of its most controversial stories and try to answer some very tough questions. Is the Bible a reliable account of miraculous interventions, of angels, apostles, and the power of prayer? Or is it just a collection of stories and myth, as some modern-day critics suggest? Both Bible skeptics and proponents from around the world have contributed to this exciting discussion. Some of these biblical revelations may shock and surprise you. At first glance, it might appear that dinosaurs and the Bible have very little to do with one another. But it is difficult not to conjure up images of dinosaurs when reading chapters 40 and 41 of Job. For example,
can you pull in a Leviathan with a fishhook? The sword that reaches him has no effect, nor does the spear or the dart or the javelin. Iron he treats like straw, bronze like rotten wood.
The description of Behemoth is just as specific, even telling us the beast was a herbivore. But does what happened to them have anything to do with our understanding of the Bible? Ever since the first dinosaur fossils were found, man has pondered the puzzle of what happened to these great and mysterious creatures. Why and how did they die? The scholarly assumption is that millions of years have passed since they disappeared. But is that true? The question may have implications for our own survival. Were the dinosaurs wiped out by some global catastrophe? If so, could the same thing happen to us? Perhaps in an effort to avoid the same fate, scientists are continually searching for answers. But dinosaurs are gone forever. Or are they? Strangely enough, the greatest clue to this earthbound mystery may have come from outer space.
In the 1980s, Luis Alvarez and his son came up with the idea that they'd observed an iridium anomaly due to the impact of a large object from space. A very large object, maybe 6, maybe 10 miles across, weighing hundreds of billions of tons, traveling at very high velocity, 12,000 miles an hour or upwards. And something with that amount of energy plowing into the Earth just causes a huge disaster. And as a result of that, you lose not just all the dinosaurs, but something like half or more of all the species on the planet.
Satellite images of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula reveal what many believe to be a scar in the Earth's crust that was left behind by the impact. The Chicxulub crater is almost 250 miles across. That's more than twice the size of the state of Rhode Island. Scientists estimate that the energy released by the impact was equal to 10,000 times the explosive power of the combined world nuclear arsenal. Did this set the stage for the death of the dinosaurs?
After the impact, a gigantic fireball wrapped around the globe. Billions of tons of molten and vaporized shattered rock were propelled skyward. As dramatic as the impact must have been, the long-term effects were devastating. When the rocks from the blast re-entered the atmosphere, they heated up the air so much that the temperature rose to 700, 800 degrees Fahrenheit. That was enough to start wildfires all across the globe. The water and air were poisoned by acid rain, mostly sulfuric acid from the vaporized rock. Once the fires stopped, then came the big chill as dust and soot blocked out the sun. Inland temperatures plummeted for several years. After all that, the infamous greenhouse effect kicked in to raise the air temperature by about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's enough to wreak havoc over the entire planet.
Where do we go to find evidence that an asteroid impact may have caused the dinosaurs' death? Actually, the same place we go to find evidence of their lives: the Earth. A record of the Earth's geological history can be found in the layers of stratified rock and sediment that are found throughout the world. According to modern geological theory, each layer of rock represents a period of time in Earth's history, and the elements that are found within this geologic column inform us about the conditions that were present on the Earth at the time the sediment was laid down.
This unusual sandstone layer is what we call an event bed. It's part of the KT boundary, which represents the interval of time when the dinosaurs went extinct. In it, we found a lot of shark teeth, shell fragments, fossilized wood, but the most important thing we found is a very high level of a rare metal called iridium. Iridium is found in very low concentrations on the Earth's surface. However, you find much more iridium in meteorites. So when you find a lot of iridium in the KT boundary, that means it was brought in by meteorites, that is, by an impact.
The presence of the rare element iridium in the KT boundary certainly seems like convincing evidence for an asteroid impact. But is the timing correct? Just how accurate is the geologic column? Is it possible there is a more terrestrial explanation, one that continues to threaten the planet even to this day?
The eruption of the Deccan Traps, one of the most violent periods of volcanism in the history of the Earth, happened about the same time as the Chicxulub impact, which most scientists feel caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. The Deccan Trap eruptions were so violent they defy imagination. These eruptions covered over 1 million square miles of land in what is now western India. And it was one lava flow upon another, building up into piles that we would not measure in terms of feet or yards, but in terms of miles.
As devastating as volcanic activity may have been to the ancient Earth, not all scientists agree that it would have been enough to cause the extinction of the dinosaurs. Could some of these creatures have survived the supposed global changes? If so, there must have been another factor that led to their final undoing, something that struck at the very core of future generations. But what?
The impact theory may point us to another possible explanation for the catastrophic eruption of the volcanism theory, that being a non-impact event between our planet Earth and another body in our solar system. Astronomers have long regarded comets as dirty snowballs, collections of ice and stellar debris. That is why they feel that a flyby event of a comet going past the Earth could not trigger a volcanic eruption or an earthquake. Rather, it would take a direct impact. However, in September 2001, our knowledge of comets took a huge leap forward when the Deep Space One probe imaged Comet Borrelli. This comet is over 6 miles in diameter, and what it taught us is that comets are much more dense and much more complex than we had ever thought. If an object the size of Comet Borrelli were to impact the Earth, it would be the end of all life. But if it just simply flew through the atmosphere, The shock wave alone would trigger massive earthquakes and huge volcanic eruptions. It could very well be a repeat of the Deccan traps.
Could the devastation brought on by volcanic activity and trapped greenhouse gases have snuffed out the lifeblood of the dinosaur population? The case seems convincing, but so does the evidence for the impact theory. Which one is correct? The fact is that scientists have lined up behind both arguments, but are they overlooking some additional evidence? Could there be another explanation for the demise of the dinosaurs? One that's been overlooked for thousands of years. There are some scientists who believe a worldwide flood may have caused the global changes that resulted in the end of the dinosaurs. Not millions of years ago, but merely thousands of years ago. But what does that do to the theory of the geologic column? Could the scientific timing be that far off? If floodwaters covered the Earth, is it even remotely possible that some dinosaurs survived the catastrophe and are perhaps even around to this day? Actually, when it comes to the demise of the dinosaurs, the two most widely accepted theories are diametrically opposed. The idea of a catastrophic impact means that the end came quickly, while the global climatic changes brought on by millions of years of volcanic activity implies a more gradual dying out of the species. Let's take a look at another possibility. The possibility that a great flood combined with volcanic activity brought about the end of the dinosaurs. There is evidence to suggest that floodwaters played a role in the mass extinction. Could it have been the watery catastrophe spoken of in the book of Genesis?
Well, I think the best evidence that the Noah flood story is not literally true is the fact that not all cultures have the flood story, and also geologically we know there was not one single massive worldwide flood.
When most people think of the Great Flood, they think of non-stop torrential rain for 40 days and 40 nights. But according to the Bible, there was more to it than that. In Genesis chapter 7, the Bible tells us that on that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. Can this ancient description be translated into a scientific explanation?
The Noah flood story is a very popular one and an ancient one. It's held by hundreds of cultures around the world, and even many before Noah and when the flood story was written in the Old Testament. There were accounts of floods, and in fact we've even been able to trace this to cultures that live on bodies of water that flood, have flood stories, and cultures that don't live near bodies of water, or cultures that live in places where there's not flash flooding and so on, they don't have flood stories. So we think there's actually a geographical explanation here, is that floods do happen locally, and those local people tell a story, a myth about the flood, and that's what got written down in the Old Testament.
That generally represents the prevailing view of the skeptics, but perhaps there is such evidence. Some scientists believe that about half the water now in the world's oceans was once in interconnected chambers about 10 miles below the Earth's surface. According to this theory, increasing levels of explosive pressure caused these springs of the great deep to erupt, and combined with heavy rainfall, the Earth was entombed in water. A worldwide flood, of course, would explain the disappearance of the dinosaurs.
The way I see it, you've got a big problem with the timeline. According to the fossil record, the last dinosaur ate his last meal about 65 million years ago. But according to the Bible, Noah's flood happened about 5,000 years ago. Now, how do you reconcile that discrepancy?
That's a good question. And the search for an answer takes us to an unexpected place, the forefront of scientific research into the origin of man.
Some researchers have been trying to say that man evolved several different times, several different places. The genetic information certainly tells a different story. All humans came from a common ancestor. A recently completed study at Yale University analyzed the genetic information contained in the Y chromosomes of various modern-day men. The results of the study suggest that Homo sapiens descended from a single group of male ancestors. And this occurred more recently than scientists had previously believed. According to the chromosomal study, mankind could not have originated more than 270,000 years ago, and even that date may be far too distant. One of the possible explanations the researchers put forth was that mankind had gone through a genetic bottleneck where nearly everybody died off. This lends credence to the biblical idea that everybody drowned except for Noah and his family.
The impact of a global flood on the inhabitants of the Earth would have been catastrophic by itself. But if water trapped beneath the Earth's surface contributed to the enormity of the flood, that adds a whole new dimension to the argument. As every good scientist knows, a major disruption in the Earth's crust inevitably leads to volcanic activity and all the catastrophic effects that go with it. A combination of fire and water would certainly seem to be enough of a catastrophe to kill off the Earth's population of dinosaurs. But is it possible some of the creatures actually survived? Which brings up another question that is often asked. Were there or were there not dinosaurs on the Ark with Noah? Most investigators brush the idea aside as simply an outlandish tale designed to support the biblical story of the flood. But recently evidence has been uncovered that confirms the flood story and suggests that man and dinosaurs may indeed have coexisted. Dr. Walt Brown is the world's leading authority on the hydroplate theory and a firm advocate of scientific support for a worldwide flood.
We can see on our planet 25 major features that can now be systematically explained as a consequence of a global flood that erupted from subterranean chambers with an energy release exceeding the explosion of 30 trillion, that's with a T, trillion hydrogen bombs.
The Bible teaches very clearly in Exodus 20:11 in the Ten Commandments that God made everything in 6 days, which means man had to live with dinosaurs. They didn't call them dinosaurs in those days, they called them dragons. They're mentioned in the Bible. In Job chapter 40 and in chapter 41 it describes 2 dinosaurs. Job 40 describes Behemoth, which has a tail like a cedar tree. This is probably the Brachiosaurus, so the biggest animal ever made. If you read the description in Job 40 with that in mind, it makes perfect sense that this is talking about a dinosaur. Many ancient cultures record evidence of man and dinosaurs living together with pictures on pottery or pictures on walls of caves or artwork. Certainly many legends exist about man and dinosaurs or dragons living together. I think the evidence is overwhelming that dinosaurs did not live before man got here.
It appears that we have much evidence in the world today that dinosaurs have lived into modern times. For example, I've done a lot of research with Indian people, and in their pictographs and petroglyphs, they have drawn pictures of dinosaurs. For example, in the Grand Canyon, one of a huge sauropod or apatosaurus-like creature, also one of a possible T-Rex. We also see in the Inca stones down in Peru, huge stones that were buried with the kings over 1,000 years ago, pictographs carved into the rock showing humans and dinosaurs interacting.
Could it be that humans and dinosaurs actually did walk the earth together? In Job 41, there is another description of something called Leviathan, which certainly fits one of the most well-known dinosaurs.
Who dares open the doors of his mouth, ringed about with fearsome teeth? His back has rows of shields tightly sealed together, each so close to the next that no air can pass between.
It seems unlikely that God would be describing something that Job had never seen. The description of Behemoth in chapter 40 of Job is just as stunning in its detail and provides a clue to the answer of whether or not Job and the monster were contemporaries.
Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. His tail sways like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are close knit. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs like rods of iron.
Then, this little bit of information.
He ranks first among the works of God.
These verses would seem to leave little doubt that dinosaurs were inhabitants of the earth along with Job. Still, most scientists would laugh at the idea. After all, the geologic column tells us that the age of the dinosaurs ended 65 million years ago. But is it possible the geologic column is wrong?
Given the fact that we have almost complete skeletons of dinosaurs that have been tested and dated going back 65 million years, and given the fact that it would be pretty difficult to hide something that big, it seems ludicrous to suggest that dinosaurs were on the scene after humankind came around.
The fallacies of the geological column can be seen in what are called polystrate fossils. Animals like whales have been found whose bodies are buried in dozens of layers of the geologic column. Either these animals lived for millions of years, or they were buried rapidly and catastrophically. The prevailing wisdom is that because the sedimentary rock containing fossils is so stratified, each layer must represent eons of time. So, if the fossil of a particular whale species is found in several different strata, then that species must have survived for millions of years. But there is another, and I think better, explanation. The process of liquefaction could easily account for many sedimentary layers being laid down one on top of the other within a short period of time. During the flood, that's exactly what happened. Wave action reduced the ocean floor to a liquid consistency as the waters churned above it. Then, as the waters began to settle, plants and animals were trapped in the sediment. These layers eventually solidified and became the fossil record.
There was a time when the scholarly consensus insisted that the earth was carried on the back of the gods, even though hundreds of years earlier the book of Job gave the world a completely different view.
He spreads out the northern sky over empty space. He suspends the earth over nothing.
Could it be that Job is once again trying to teach the world a new truth? This startling discovery indicates that some ancient animals may have escaped the Genesis flood. In 1977, the nets of a Japanese fishing ship caught the decaying body of what was believed to be a long-extinct amphibious dinosaur. And there have been other surprising discoveries.
In 1983, Russians found dinosaur and human footprints in the same rock strata, similar to the ones found in Glen Rose, Texas. Evidence of man and dinosaurs living together has come from other countries as well. Several places in the United States and in Australia indicate they live together. Occasionally the footprints are overlapping each other, frequently side by side, indicating they had to be there within a few hours of each other, or the rock would have hardened and this would not have been possible.
Here at Glen Rose, Texas, in the Cretaceous limestone layers, we've excavated a nearly complete Acrocanthosaurus dinosaur, along with 203 dinosaur footprints, 7 cat prints, 57 identifiable human footprints, a confirmed human finger in the same Cretaceous limestone layering, and in adjacent area was discovered completely encased in Cretaceous sandstone an ancient hammer. These excavated evidences confirm that the Genesis account of the flood is viable, that the record of man and dinosaur living contemporaneously, as given in the book of Job, is correct.
The great flood of the Bible could certainly account for the disappearance of the dinosaurs and the formation of the fossil record. But as has been pointed out, according to the best estimates of Bible scholars, Noah's flood occurred a mere 5,000 years ago. If in fact some species of dinosaurs were alive up until that time, what happened to these animals when the floodwaters receded?
Most of the food chain was buried in the Great Flood. Then, as the floodwaters receded, the planet inevitably underwent some major climatic changes, which negatively affected the food chain. So, if any dinosaurs survived the flood, they probably had difficulty feeding themselves and, as a result, became extinct.
Whatever calamity overtook these creatures, most people believe they were wiped out completely thousands, if not millions of years ago. But what if some have survived, even to this day?
There's strong evidence that dinosaurs still live in the world today. In the jungles of the Congo in Africa, the native people talk about a creature they call Makili Mombembe. Scientists, using pictures and the descriptions the people have given them, have classified this as a sauropod or an apatosaurus. Myself, I have led expeditions to Canada looking for one that the native people call Ogopogo or Manapogo in Lake Manitoba. And we have interviewed Native American people there who have given descriptions as well as eyewitness accounts of this creature. We think that one may be a plesiosaurus or a basilosaurus.
If you're willing to include pterodactyls and plesiosaurs in the dinosaur category, then there are dinosaurs, pterodactyls and plesiosaurs being seen in numerous countries. They've been seen in Kenya, Africa, and Indonesia. Reports of these critters come from many places. I've had many people that I've interviewed that claim they've seen one of these animals. The pterodactyls have about a 4-foot wingspan. The plesiosaurs seem to be 15 or 20 feet long, so not as big as they used to be.
But if dinosaurs are alive today, what does that mean in terms of the Bible record? Can we assume the creatures described by Job were real? Does this add to our confidence that the Bible still has much to teach us? If relics from the age of the dinosaurs are being found alive in modern times, does that raise the confidence level even more? A species of prehistoric fish called the coelacanth was thought to have been extinct for millions of years, until a living specimen was caught off the coast of Africa in the early 20th century. Luckily, an observant museum curator was on the docks that day to inspect the fisherman's catch and verify the find. The fisherman told the curator that they'd caught this kind of fish before, but they had no idea it was anything special. Is the case of the coelacanth a rare exception, or are there more living dinosaurs just waiting to be found? The possibilities are mind-boggling.
As unbelievable as it may sound, dinosaur bones have recently been found that are not fully fossilized. According to the accepted geological time frame, these bones should be at least 65 million years old. And yet, when they were examined under a microscope, they were found to contain non-fossilized bone, protein, blood cells, and even the blood protein hemoglobin.
Given the geologic column, how is it possible that dinosaur bones failed to fossilize after millions of years? Could it be that the discovery of non-fossilized bones actually supports the biblical time frame? The entire science of oceanography began with one young sailor reading a passage in the Bible that speaks of rivers in the sea. With nothing but faith to guide him, he began to look for those rivers and discovered the great ocean currents. Perhaps these ancient secrets of the Bible and dinosaurs, dead or alive, still have much to teach us.